Hey everyone, welcome to Design of Tech. I'm Daniel, and these are the brand new iPhones, the iPhone 6s and the iPhone 6s Plus. And I've already done 2 videos on these, an epic music synced slow motion unboxing, and my first impressions. And until my in-depth reviews are out, which should be by the end of next week by the way, I still have a couple of in-depth tests that I really wanted to do. And this is the first one, and in this one I'll be covering the performance. So Apple says that the new A9 chip that's inside the new iPhones is actually the most powerful mobile chip on the planet. Desktop class performance, or at least that's what Apple says. So let's put these to the test and compare them with some high-end smartphones, tablets, and even laptops. This is my in-depth performance test of the new Apple A9 chip. Enjoy. And these are the devices that I'll be testing: the iPhone 6s, the iPhone 6s Plus, then the OnePlus 2, which at the moment has the most powerful chip from Qualcomm, the Snapdragon 810, along with 4GB of RAM, then obviously last year's iPhone 6, and also the iPad mini 4, which comes with an overclocked version of the Apple A8 chip. And it also comes with 2GB of RAM, so it's somewhere in between the iPhone 6s and the iPhone 6. And all devices have exactly the same apps, they're all running the latest operating system, and all of them except for the iPhone 6s Plus are 64GB models. Next up, I wanted to do a boot test to see which device would boot up first. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so the first to boot was the iPhone 6s Plus, which booted in just under 19 seconds. Then came the iPhone 6s, which booted in 21 seconds, the iPad mini 4, which booted in 23, the iPhone 6 3 seconds later at 26 seconds, and finally the last one to boot was surprisingly the OnePlus 2 with 4GB of RAM and the Snapdragon 810. Okay, so I've closed all the apps running in the background from all devices, and all devices have exactly the same apps except for the iPhone 6s Plus, which only comes in 16GB of capacity. So I'm going to remove that. I'm going to do an app launch speed test just to see which device is fastest when it comes to launching apps. So Google Chrome first, 3, 2, 1, go. And on camera they looked about the same, but if we slow this down you can see that actually the OnePlus 2 opened up Google Chrome the fastest. So the OnePlus 2 gets a point. Next up, Twitter. 3, 2, 1, go. And again, the OnePlus 2 launched Twitter the fastest, followed by the iPhone 6s and 6, and lastly the iPad mini 4, which has the most pixels to push. So the OnePlus 2 gets another point. Next up, YouTube. And the iPhone 6s opened up YouTube the fastest, but the iPhone 6 loaded up the content faster. So the point here goes to the 6s since all devices were rubbing each other's bandwidth, being on the same Wi-Fi network. Moving on to a few 3D intensive games, Temple Run opened up the fastest on the iPhone 6s, followed by the OnePlus 2, and then the rest. So the iPhone 6s gets another point. Then Crossy Road opened up first on the iPad mini 4, not sure why. And in terms of a more graphic intensive game, such as Dead Trigger 2, the 6s was the first to load up the game, followed really closely by the iPad mini 4, the iPhone 6 shortly after, and the staggering 20-second delay for the OnePlus 2. And just one more game, Dumb Ways to Die 2. And again, the first to load up the game was the 6s. So in terms of the app launch time, the A9 chip inside the iPhone 6s is definitely the fastest. Next up, I wanted to do a RAM test just to see which device manages RAM the best. So the iPhone 6 comes with just 1GB of RAM, 6s was upgraded to 2GB, and the OnePlus 2 comes with a staggering 4GB of RAM, the most in any smartphone on the market right now. So I'm going to open up the same web pages on all smartphones, all in a different tab, just to see which one can retain the most pages in memory. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's go back to the first web page that we've opened, The Verge. And the iPhone 6 apparently has to reload the page entirely, so it cannot retain it in the memory. The 6s on the other hand is buttery smooth, and the same goes for the OnePlus 2. Now let's try 9 to 5 Google, and again the iPhone 6 has to completely reload the page, the 6s doesn't, and the OnePlus 2 doesn't. So you can definitely see how important it is to have a lot of RAM. Now let's try a few games that we've opened in the previous test. Crossy Road first, and we have no reload on the OnePlus 2, it's completely playable, so that's impressive. Same goes for the iPhone 6s, even though the 6s only has 2GB of RAM when compared to 4 that the OnePlus 2 has. And then the iPhone 6, you guessed it, had to reload the game entirely. 1GB of RAM is just not enough. Now let's try Twitter. The iPhone 6 has to reload it again. The 6s is perfectly fluid, no reload or lag whatsoever, and the OnePlus 2 surprisingly had to reload it again. Okay, let's try YouTube. iPhone 6 again had to reload. The 6S no reload, and the OnePlus 2 apparently had to reload it again. So even though it comes with 4GB of RAM, iOS 9 apparently has a much better RAM management. And finally, let's try a different game, Dumb Ways to Die 2. The iPhone 6 had to reload it again. The 6S is perfectly fluid, the game is fully playable as expected, and the OnePlus 2 surprisingly froze. Oh no, now it started to load again. But yeah, it's taking ages, not sure why. So there you go, in terms of RAM management, even though the iPhone 6s only has 2GB of RAM when compared to 4GB that the OnePlus 2 has, we can see how well iOS is optimized to deal with a lower amount of RAM. Now it's time for some actual benchmarks. In terms of the specs, the iPhone 6 is the weakest of them all, at least on paper. So it comes with a 1.4 GHz dual-core processor and 1GB of RAM. Then the iPad mini 4 comes with a slightly overclocked A8 chip, still dual-core, but this time at 1.5 GHz and 2GB of RAM. Both iPhone 6s still come with a 1.84 GHz, still dual-core Apple A9 chip, and 2GB of RAM. And finally, the OnePlus 2 comes with a Snapdragon 810 chip, the most powerful chip from Qualcomm, which has 2 quad-core processors in it. One clocked at 1.55 GHz and one at 1.82, as well as 4GB of RAM. So on paper at least, the OnePlus 2 definitely smashes all the apples, but let's see if that's actually true. So the first test that I'm going to do is an Octane render test to test both the CPU and the browser performance. And the iPhone 6s got a ridiculous score of over 16,000, 9,500 on the iPad mini 4, not that bad, almost 9,000 on the iPhone 6, and the OnePlus 2 is still going apparently. And surprisingly, the Snapdragon 810 only got a score of 3,181, but that's Google Chrome to blame. So let's try something else. This time I'm testing the JavaScript performance on all devices, and again the iPhone 6s finished the fastest in just 209 milliseconds, 334 on the iPad mini 4, 343 on the iPhone 6, so really close, and the OnePlus 2 took ages to finish and got 1,432 milliseconds. Ouch. Now these were mostly browser tests, although the CPU was involved as well. But now let's do something more intensive. So let's do some GPU tests and test out the graphical performance of those devices. Okay, so I'm going to run the Manhattan GFX bench on all devices, and the results were really surprising. The iPhone 6s did get the highest, so 56.2 frames per second, followed by the iPhone 6s Plus, which only got 38.5, then the iPhone 6, which only got 30 frames per second, the Snapdragon 810 inside the OnePlus 2, which got 20, and finally the iPad mini 4, which got the lowest, just 15.3. So you may ask yourselves how come the iPad mini 4 was the weakest and the iPhone 6s Plus was almost the same as the old iPhone 6. Well, this is because they all have a different resolution. So the higher the screen resolution, the more pixels they have to push, so the lower the score. The iPad mini 4 has the highest resolution, hence the lowest score. So what I've done next is that I've ran all the tests again, but this time off screen at 1080p. And this time the scores actually made sense. Both iPhone 6s finished at the same time and got about 40 frames per second, which was pretty good. The iPad mini 4 got 21.2, followed by the iPhone 6 which got 19, and then the OnePlus 2 with the most powerful mobile GPU from Qualcomm, the Adreno 430, finished last after a really long wait and got a score of 17, so pretty close to the iPhone 6 and the iPad mini 4. And finally the test you've all been waiting for, testing out the raw CPU performance this time with Geekbench. And this time the king was actually the iPhone 6s, at least in terms of the single core score, and then the OnePlus 2 got the highest for the multi-core score, since it has 8 cores in total. But overall the iPhone 6s has the highest score. So let's bring in the big guns, Intel processors. And guess what, when compared to my 12-inch MacBook, which comes with a Broadwell Intel Core M CPU, the iPhone 6s actually gets a higher single core score, almost the same for the multi-core score. So time to bring in some even bigger guns, the MacBook Air. And take a look at this, the Intel Core i5 Haswell chip this time inside my MacBook Air is just slightly more powerful than the iPhone 6s. So the A9 chip is really powerful, definitely a desktop class processor, just like Apple claims. And obviously I wanted to compare this with my main machine, my 15-inch Retina MacBook Pro with a Haswell quad-core i7 chip, and yes, the difference is huge. But if we take a look at an iPhone 4S, which only got 211 for the single core score, the difference between the iPhone 6s and the top-of-the-line MacBook Pro is not that huge actually. So having said this, I wanted to test out one more thing, 4K video editing performance. And for this, I shot a 1-minute clip with my iPhone 6s, imported the footage on all devices, and exported it via iMovie. And these were the results. The 12-inch MacBook with the Intel Core M chip exported in 2 minutes and 53 seconds, so almost 3 times the length of the video. Not that bad. Then the MacBook Air with the Haswell Intel Core i5 chip finished in surprisingly 3 minutes and 25 seconds, so worse than the Core M, not sure why. I did this multiple times and got the same result. My main machine, the late 2013 15-inch Retina MacBook Pro, finished in just 38 seconds, so wow, that's really impressive, almost half the length of the video. And then, guess what? The iPhone 6s finished exporting this in just 1 minute and 6 seconds, beating both the Intel Core M chip and the Haswell i5 chip, and actually was really close to my quad-core i7 chip inside my MacBook Pro. And by the way, fun fact, that Geekbench score is just slightly lower than the top-of-the-line Mac Pro with a 12-core Intel Xeon CPU. Okay, so as a conclusion, the iPhone 6s is fast. It's definitely the fastest smartphone out there, and in fact, it was so fast that it actually outperformed my MacBook, my 12-inch MacBook, and even my MacBook Air in 4K video editing. It wasn't quite powerful enough to defeat my main machine, but definitely expect the iPhone 7s, so the one that's coming in 2 years, to bring some serious performance improvements. So that one's definitely going to defeat my main machine. And yeah, it's really interesting that we got to a point where technology got so powerful and so advanced that we can simply pack extremely powerful chips and devices this size. And in the future, most probably 15 years from now, all devices will be equal. Your phone, tablet, console, all of them will be as powerful as your desktop computer. They will all have the exact same performance. Only size will be a difference. And this is because today the biggest limitations are chip size and power consumption. So the more powerful a chip is, the more energy it consumes. Back in 2003, my computer had 128 megabytes of RAM. Now my phone has 4 gigabytes. How insane is that? But yeah, do let me know what do you think of this. Feel free to spam that comment section. And also feel free to spam that like button there if you have enjoyed this video. And also subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this one. There are just a few more in-depth tests that are coming with the iPhones, then my full reviews, and then I'm back to doing some non-Apple stuff. Because my channel has been Zen of Apple lately. But yeah, anyway, thank you all for watching this video. I'm Daniel, and I'll see you in the next one. Daniel, signing out. Cheers.